Is anxiety and depression causing your constipation? Or is constipation causing your anxiety and depression? In today's video, we're talking about all things constipation, what you can do about it, why it's happening, and how it's related to anxiety and depression. Constipation is very common. I see this a lot in a lot of my clients, and I personally struggled with constipation for years. If you're new here, hello, and welcome to this growing community of people who are struggling with anxiety and depression and ready to heal. I'm Carrie Bailey, your functional nutritionist. I work with people with anxiety, depression, and other weird mystery symptoms, and together we heal. Let's start off talking about what constipation is. There are 4 factors I look for to determine if someone is constipated. First, if you're going less than once a day, that's constipation. Now, most doctors will tell you if you go less than 3 times a week, that's a problem. But I say if you're eating every day, you should be pooping every day. If you are straining in any way to make a bowel movement, or you have to sit on the toilet for long periods of time, that's constipation. If you have a bowel movement, but it doesn't feel satisfying, it doesn't feel like you finished pooping, that could be a problem. Incomplete pooping, I would call constipation. And lastly, what is the consistency of your poop? If you're familiar at all with the Bristol stool chart, you'll know that 1 and 2 are definitely constipation. Number 1, it looks like rabbit pellets, so little round balls. And number 2 on the Bristol stool chart it's a full piece, but it's kind of lumpy and dry. So there's a number of factors that can cause constipation. Dehydration is the number 1. So if you're not drinking enough water, or at least 8 glasses a day, that could be a problem. If you're drinking caffeinated drinks throughout the day, whether that's 1 or 8, if it's caffeine from coffee or tea, this can include black tea, white tea, and green tea, all have caffeine and can be dehydrating, or because they're all diuretics. And so you want to make sure that you compensate for that by drinking more water. Alcohol is also very dehydrating. So if you're drinking alcohol, that could be causing dehydration and therefore constipation. Also, if you're not getting enough fruits and vegetables themselves contain a lot of liquid, a lot of fluid, a lot of water in them. So when you're eating them, you're kind of staying hydrated. But if instead of fruits and vegetables, you're eating primarily processed foods, which come from flours, and they're dry. If you think about it, anything in a package or a bag, even a bread, right? A bread, even if it's a gluten-free bread, might be too dry, right? It might be dehydrating you more and soaking up the water, the little bit of water that you have in your digestive tract. And lastly, if there's too much fat and protein in your diet, that can actually thicken your blood and cause dehydration. The second cause of constipation is medications. Many of you might know that painkillers, whether those are prescribed or over the counter, those can cause constipation. Antibiotics are also very famous for causing problems. I have a client that came to me very constipated, and she had been, in the previous year or 2, been on a 3-month prescribed doxycycline for her acne, and that triggered some severe constipation for her. So medications for GERD and acid reflux, they either neutralize or reduce your stomach acid. These include like antacids. PPIs, or proton pump inhibitors, can also cause constipation because they lower your stomach acid and prevent you from really digesting your food very well, and therefore that food is putrefying. Proton pump inhibitors include Prevacid and Prilosec. And the third category of stomach-reducing medications are H2 blockers, like Pepcid. The third cause of constipation is your microbiome. So this can be unproductive bacteria, viruses, molds, fungi, yeast, those types of things. Too much of that can lead to constipation. These microbiome imbalances lead to inflammation in the digestive tract. It can be in the stomach, the small intestines, or the large intestines. We talked a little bit about that in the last video, Fix Your Anxiety, Fix Your Gut. You can find a connection to that video right here. Now, these microbes can also lead to, over time, can lead to structural issues with your small intestines and your large intestines. They can create scar tissues, they can create narrowing in the passage, and so the stool has a trouble getting through those passages. And the final cause of constipation might be that feeling of being incomplete poop might be a peristalsis issue. So that peristalsis we talked to in the last video too. So that's the smooth muscles moving that food along through the digestive system. And this can happen when the peristalsis gets weak, whether the smooth muscles themselves get weak or whether the nerves that trigger the neurons that trigger that muscle to move, get weak. Now, you might have heard of the most famous nerve, and that's the vagus nerve. And so the vagus nerve can become really weak. The vagus nerve is part of your parasympathetic nervous system. Remember, the parasympathetic nervous system is your rest and digest. And that's why it's so important to rest and digest while you're eating your food, not just while you're eating, but even for the few hours after you eat. So this vagus nerve can become inflamed, and that's going to cause problems with that path, the traffic from the head to the gut. But that vagus nerve also runs things from the gut back to the head. The ways to stimulate the vagus nerve are humming, chanting, gargling, and singing. Let's talk about the remedies for constipation, some of the things that you can do. The best thing you can do is make sure that you're hydrated. Make sure that you're drinking plenty of water. Now, this might mean that you need to cut out caffeine or alcohol or dry foods. You might need to bring in more fruits and vegetables to really hydrate. So making sure that you're hydrated. In order to stay hydrated, it's important to have about 8 glasses of water. And another way to think about how much water you need is by taking your weight and then dividing that in ounces. So for instance, if you weigh 128 pounds, then you're going to need half of that, 64 in ounces. So 64 ounces is about 8 cups. So obviously, if you weigh 200 pounds, you're going to need a lot more water. And if you only weigh 100 pounds, you might only need 6 cups of water. So here's a pro tip. Sometimes people don't always like the taste of water. They're not in the habit of drinking water. And so my recommendation is to put a little lemon, or even herbal teas qualify as water or liquid in your diet. You could be mineral water. You can get really creative in the ways that you would drink water, including drinking it from a straw or drinking it warm or drinking it cold. So it's whatever you need to do to stay hydrated. That's the best way to bring the water in. So here's a pro tip that I always do with my clients that are struggling with constipation when they first start seeing me, is I like to bring 2 cups of lemon water first thing in the morning. It's amazing. It really does trigger, unless things are really bad, it does trigger that urgency, that desire to poop. Sometimes it takes more than that, or it takes a period of time to really get them used to that lemon water. But sometimes right off the bat, that lemon water triggers bowel movement. Another thing I like to do is make sure that bring in lots of fruit in the morning. Fruit in the morning is great because it's really easy to digest. There's no fats, there's no proteins in the system. And so those fruits digest really well. And those get in there, they start lubricating the digestive system. It works like magic. So this can be fruit that you're going to eat whole, or if you're maybe you don't like fruit, you can make a smoothie. And with that smoothie, I love to bring in bananas and blueberries. Maybe it's something seasonal, like right now we're in fall. So maybe you want to bring in some pumpkin and some spices and really make it fun. And when it's just fruit, I like to bring in I like to supplement a little with a green powder. And my favorite green powder to bring in is spirulina. Spirulina is a seaweed, and it's filled with vitamins and minerals. It's way better than a multivitamin. So if you need a multivitamin, spirulina would be my add-in in the morning with fruit. Spirulina not only detoxifies heavy metals, but it also helps to get rid of radiation. It also helps to rebuild your nervous system. So if you've become burnt out, you've got an adrenal issue, and maybe that's what led even to your depression, then bringing in spirulina is really going to help recover that nervous system. Another thing that's important for the digestive system and for constipation is movement. So not necessarily running a marathon, but just moving every single day, whether it's walking, any kind of twisting movement, because your lymphatic system, most of which is in the small intestines, if you're not able to move that, there is no pump, right? So in the heart moves the blood. The blood circulates and the heart pumps. And so your blood is constantly moving. But your lymphatic system requires muscle to movement. So you could also do things like massage to move your lymph. That's a great way to move it, or any kind of, physical stimulation on the body. That's going to move it. But the best thing that you can do is move your body every day. And finally, my favorite supplements to help with constipation are magnesium. And the form that I like is citrate if it's really bad. And citrate really does trigger that bowel movement. So it's also important why you don't want a high dose magnesium citrate if you don't have a bowel movement issue, if you don't have constipation. But magnesium citrate really does get things moving. And lastly, vitamin C. Vitamin C is another great thing to bring in if you're struggling with constipation. So you're probably wondering, okay, what does this constipation issue have to do with my anxiety and depression? Or maybe you're wondering, was it really the anxiety and depression that are causing the constipation? And the answer is yes, it could be either way. So anxiety and depression are whole body manifestations. So if things are off, that can definitely lead to anxiety and depression. Same thing if you are struggling with anxiety and depression, that can later lead to health issues like constipation. So everybody's unique. You really have to look at someone's complete history to really understand what triggered what. Was it the anxiety and depression that triggered the constipation, or was it the other way around? If for some reason your nervous system gets overstimulated, that can trigger anxiety. And there's connections with the digestive system and your nervous system, right? So the vagus nerve is a nerve that affects your digestive system. And if it becomes inflamed, then that's going to probably cause more adrenaline, more cortisol to surge in the body. And that can lead to anxiety and depression. It can also burn out your adrenal glands if you are constantly or chronically getting overstimulating your nervous system and stressed, basically. You have the combination of too much stress and too much inflammation in the body. That's like the perfect storm. And that's going to cause excess adrenaline and excess cortisol in the body. Over time, you're going to have this depletion of the adrenal glands, which is one of the things that can lead to depression. So today we talked about anxiety, depression, and some of the things you can do to improve it. And we talked about whether anxiety is causing depression or depression is causing anxiety. I'd love to know your thoughts from today's video. Pop a comment below, or subscribe if you love what you're seeing so that you can get this in your inbox every week. If you need a little bit more support, check the Anxiety Depression Recovery Guide in the description below. There, I'm going to give you videos and tips and tricks so that you can start healing your anxiety and depression right away. Thanks so much for watching. See you next week.